Hello, and be welcome to the world of darkness. Long ago was it that the sin of Cain spawned the cursed horror that stalks the street at night in search of living blood. The kindred have long been a secret influence through all ages of human history, plotting against one another in a never-ending jihad. Their immortal progeny are among us to this day, hidden from the eyes of humanity by an elaborate masquerade.
Mr. Thorne, spelled with an E at the end, thank you very much, Mr. Kim, begins his evening in the chantry, looks over those letters, and draws up plans for an expansion, or rather, the birth of a new business. Rather than his Lockmen of London, he shall create the Latchkey Company. The tagline, cleverly devised as Unlocking London. Whereas the omnibuses currently are run up until the stroke of midnight, these shall go on till the wee hours of the morning, as Father Thomas is wont to say, I imagine. They are to revitalise industry, to bolster the workforce of London by allowing more shifts to take place in the factories, more business to prosper, more money to be made. And so, I shall go first to my lieutenants in the Lockman, those that oversee my operations, and ask them, well, indeed, find out if there are any members of our organisation who are deserving of such a reward, that of running this new venture.
As you make your preparations for this night, preparing to leave, gathering your cane, checking your hair, and just overall making sure you have all the papers and such on you as needed, you hear the distinctive step of your primogen regent, Edward Bainbridge, as he enters the room, with a polite smile on his face as he moves into one of the chairs, the plush velvet seat creaking slightly, and setting down his glass of, cup of tea beside him. As he is one to enjoy tea, is still able to imbibe human drink and food. The smell of it coming to you is pleasant, though unappealing to your hunger. You haven't had tea for many years now, and it is becoming somewhat disconcerting as you become more accustomed to life to see someone you know for a fact is kindred ingest it.
As he enters the room, I shall turn to him, and after he sits, do a low bow, my cane in my right hand going to my heart, my primogen.
Picking up the small plate which holds his cup, he rests it over his lap as he clasps the handle. No need to be so formal, he smiles. And how are you this evening, Mr. Thorne? Is all going well?
Indeed, Mr. Bainbridge, all is going quite well. Ms. Thorne is, I believe, conducting business with that Nosferatu, Alden, in Whitechapel this evening. I shall have a report ready for you in the coming nights.
I would hope so. If I might have some of your time, however, before you go.
Of course, Mr. Bainbridge.
Lifting his cup, he savors the rich red-colored tea, and then sets it down with a slight clink. There is a matter of business that I need you to handle on behalf of the clan. You will need to be recompensed, and that shall be done without issue. One of your ships need venture to Burma, where it will collect a large sum of black powder. It will then dock in Bombay and await further instruction. The gunpowder has already been purchased and nearly needs to be collected.
Of course. I shall organize it immediately.
Please see that you do. I would like the utmost discretion on this matter. It is a matter of clan's interest within the Indian continent. Something I'm sure you're more than capable of handling.
Yes, Mr. Bainbridge.
He takes another sip from his tea, uttering a soft ah. He sets the glass down and, putting aside cup and plate, softly he pushes himself up and removes from his breast pocket a bit of paper for you. Have your men show this in Burma. They will need to dock in Yangon.
Of course, Mr. Bainbridge, and Edmund would take it from him gently and politely.
He doesn't give you much fuss. I trust you're going to be occupied this evening as well.
Indeed, I am seeking to expand my businesses to garner capital for the good of the clan.
Well, that's well and good, I suppose. I will have you informed that there is a matter I also need you to oversee. I trust you already know what I speak of.
Yes, Mr. Bainbridge. What exactly do you have in mind, if I may ask?
Regarding your responsibilities into these investigations, do keep in mind not to draw much attention to yourself. I trust you've been using suitable methods. I have been keeping up to date with your reports. But you might consider, for instance, your sister's situation where she is located, Highgate. It can be useful to conceal ourselves, particularly from the prince, who does have agents looking to determine where it is we have our sway. What I am saying is for you to consider using a smokescreen in your dealings as well as in clan business.
Thank you, Mr. Bainbridge. I shall do so.
Well, I hope it all goes well for you. Fortunately, there's nothing more to discuss, unless you have anything of which you wish to talk about. I could do with some socializing before I have to go. I was hoping to speak at a new display at the British Museum, though I doubt many of the venture will come.
Truly a shame. Unfortunately, I do not believe I will have the opportunity to attend either. Would you care to enlighten me, as it were, to the talk you are about to give?
There has been some discussion regarding the supernatural lore of the Indian continent. I've been able to document a good amount of recently a acquisition has come to the British Museum of a relic found in some old temple within India. You might remember it as it was on one of your ships when it arrived. This was some time ago, but it's only now being put on display. Mortals have a slightly different interpretation of its mythology. I intend to propose a counter-argument. If nothing else, it should acquire the interest of at least some of the local kindred.
And what is this theory of yours, Mr. Bainbridge?
Something that your sister discovered in her studies while in Egypt. A conflict going on within the Indian continent between the native Ravnos and some foreign enemy. Though there have been discoveries of Ventru who go native in India, even distinguishing themselves by a different name than that of the clan. It may be a preserved piece of kindred history. One that, if presented in the correct light, could garner us some support in our expertise on.
Fascinating. I do hope you could fortune in your endeavours tonight, Mr. Bainbridge.
Mr. Thorne, you have no interest in matters of the occult. I don't judge. He picks up his teacup again and rests it as it was before. You weren't embraced because of your thaumaturgical potential. You were embraced for other reasons. You don't need to pretend that you're curious about these things, and if you legitimately are, well, I'd imagine I would have seen more of your interest when it comes to your magister.
My apologies, Mr. Bainbridge. It is, of course, not the occult knowledge that I find so interesting, but more so the potential piece of history that we have uncovered.
History is written by the victors. If presented in the correct light, that is, favoring the Ventru, it's beneficial to us. As for the truth, maybe we'll find that out for ourselves.
On the topic of the Ventru, I have been in contact with one in Singapore. I endeavour to visit the state in the coming months, hopefully to make a new ally amongst their clan.
Allies would be appreciated. We'll see about this trip of yours in the time.
This potential ally of mine is the childer of
Aloysius Hasbury.
Indeed.
You were asking after him?
I was.
Mr. Thorne, you are very valuable to the clan. Not as a thaumaturge, but in your own right. We have no reason for you to be in Singapore. You are useful to us here. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but you must consider the opportunities that are for you here. You have the entire support of your clan. Singapore, perhaps in time. That's something we'll talk about again in a couple of months. See how this acquaintanceship plays out for a little longer. You're still quite young. There's no need to rush into these things.
Of course, Mr. Bainbridge.
He takes another refreshing sip of his tea.
How is this last shipment of tea, Mr. Bainbridge? I hope it is to your liking.
It is. I thank you for the gift. You and Ms. Gray are the only ones who gift me anything. At least of the edible sort. For all manner of gifts from abroad.
It is always a pleasure. And I do hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening, Mr. Bainbridge. May I have permission to leave?
Far be it from me to stop you. Please see that the Bombay situation is handled, and discreetly, please.
Of course, Mr. Bainbridge, and I tuck the bill of sale that I had taken into my inner coat pocket.
Have a good evening. And if you need anything, remember to come back here. In fact, I believe we have some blood in store should you need it, kept preserved, naturally.
Thank you, Mr. Bainbridge. I am not in need of refreshment at this time. Have a good evening.
You as well.
And with that, I take my leave, cane in hand, not clacking it down the corridors of the Chantry. I leave the Chantry, my ghoul not with me, conducting himself in Westminster Abbey, I believe I told him to be at. Instead, I have one of my employees taking me to, well, my base of operations in the city. That being in Camden Town. The famous Camden Lock that I've named my associates after.
Descending the steps from the Chantry, you notice your man currently stood before your carriage. He is in the midst of removing his hat from his head, sort of rub at the balding top. Yet, as he becomes aware of you, he quickly replaces it promptly back. It is then that you notice his mustache stands out rather prominently, the rest of his face clean shaven, his hair done well, his dress, or state of dress, clean. He holds open the door to your carriage. Good evening, Mr. Thorne.
Good evening, Mr. Tewsbury. How are you?
It's a good evening. A good evening for business of any sort.
I quite agree, Edmund says with a smile, and enters the carriage.
He gives a last wary look to Bainbridge's residence. You can see a hesitance in his gaze, a sense of discomfort.
Pay no mind to it, my good man.
Of course, Mr. Thorne. He pushes closed the door, clicking it shut. Where will we be off to, Mr. Thorne?
Our headquarters, Mr. Tewsbury. I have need of our lieutenant's attention.
I'll be sure to let some of the urchins know to round up the boys when we get up there.
Splendid.
With that, you can hear him clambering up into the carriage, preparing to depart. What's going through Edmund's mind at the moment as he jostles ever so slightly in the carriage, the sound of the horse's hooves clacking against the stones?
The initial reply I'd written to Lord Varney. I really should have okayed sending that with Mr. Bainbridge. Having to go back on one's word as such, or indeed allow such time to pass after a promise. It's not a good look. But, yes, these things must be done, and it is, after all, my fault. Well, first things first. Mr. Bainbridge and his orders are my priority. The orders of the clan are my purpose. However much I would love to go to Singapore and crush that useless urchin.
We're going to jump ahead a couple of pages to as Mr. Edmund Thorne is in his office. Feel free to describe it as you wish, as he awaits his lieutenants, some of them having to be called from where they were doing business or, well, just having a night out.
Edmund sits in his royal blue suit with his ascot, not with his jewel, though. It is, well, being in Camden Town as it is, drawing too much attention to oneself is not a good idea, especially not if you want to avoid dirtying such a precious artifact. His hair is done, his face, well, the same as it was many years ago. He sits behind his rich wooden desk. American mahogany. From the days of his New World imports. Oh, those were the times. Well, his desk is laden with papers and things. He sits in a chair that is almost throne-like, at least to the untrained and lower class eye. It is plush red cushioning on an African ebony frame. The windows are the standard cross pattern. Open the curtains open, allowing the moonlight to drift in, illuminating the room. There is a carpet on the floor, not very ornate, though distinctly pretty. One from the Middle East, Egypt, most definitely. The colours are not quite vibrant. It would not suit the mood of the room. Though the patterns are exquisite. There are, in the room opposite the desk, 2 chairs. Again, plush red cushioning, with a stained oaken frame. Behind, towards the door to the room, is a bench. Again, one of oak, sturdy, good English wood. Stained, of course, with boiled linseed oil. Allows the grain to materialize itself. Good stately wood. That is for any men that those that myself and my lieutenants are to call upon should be in the room with us, surely. That or retainers.
As the door to the office opens, you quickly note that Angus, Mr. Foster, and Hamlin, Mr. Hamlin, are already removing their hats as they enter the room. They both incline their head towards you as Foster closes the door. Hamlin waiting for him as they walk almost in step closer. Angus is the first to speak. Good evening, Mr. Thorne. You called us?
Indeed, I did. Please, take a seat, gentlemen.
Most gracious of you, Mr. Thorne. Wouldn't mind it myself. Hamlin hesitates for a moment, keeping his hand on the back of the other seat. He inclines his head once again and settles himself down into a seat as Foster, making himself a bit more comfortable, unbuttons the first button of his vest. Breathe a little more easily.
I have 2 matters of business to discuss with you, good men. And as I'm saying this, I shall employ my heightened senses and read the aura of Mr. William Hamlin. He seems rather uneasy around me.
Go ahead and roll, my friend. Most distinctly, that which you care to investigate is there is a slight purple in his aura when he glances over to Foster. They might have had some argument falling out. Though when he does look to you, there is a bit more rose colors coming through, particularly around the head and heart. Yet every time he does happen to glance back to Foster, a clash between the purple and lavender seemed to overtake him.
Now, first and foremost, gentlemen, a matter that we are all 3 far too familiar with. Mr. Hamlin, I believe this may be your area of expertise. I take the bill of sale out of my coat pocket and slide it along the desk towards him.
Leaning forward, he extends his hand for it, then looks up, making sure it's all right before he takes it.
That is a bill of sale for certain goods that we are to transport from Burma to Bombay. That is the bill of sale, which shall be shown in Burma at collection.
Taking the paper as you spoke, he leaned back into his seat and opened it up to read over its contents as you continued speaking. Once you finished and he's done reading, he's folded it in half, not all the way as it was before, folded into 4 sections. Gunpowder, Mr. Thorne. I wasn't aware that we would be expanding operations.
It is a private charter. A most private charter, you understand.
Absolutely, Mr. Thorne. Would you like me to hire a couple of extra guards considering the cargo? There have been pirate activities going on in the British Indian Sea.
Yes, that would be well. Although, do take care not to draw too much attention to that vessel.
He shakes his head. A couple of Deptford boys looking for work. All they care about is that they'll have some shillings to line their pockets. Irish are always an easy bunch to get when it comes to matters of violence.
Indeed, they are. Also, be sure to take some goods, maybe some silk, from our ports. May as well keep the boys fed on their own trading pockets. Get them some training, too, in Burma.
Crossing his arms, he brings up his left hand to stroke at the edges of his mustache. It wasn't long ago, the other day, that I'd read, Mr. Thorne, that there was a want for Chinese rice. Maybe we could buy some rice cheap in Burma, pass it off as Chinese. Mr. Foster interjects, looking to Hamlet. Now that seems like a perfectly good waste of money. We already have dock in Singapore, it's even cheaper. Hamlin glowers at him. Yes, but we don't have any business arrangements in Burma. This is an easy way of making introduction. And we should buy something to attract better business. Mr. Thorne doesn't need to waste his time with wasted efforts on rice. Go for tea. Tea's assured.
Gentlemen,
they both look to you.
I do appreciate the ambition both of you present. It is, of course, why you are held so highly in my esteem, though this voyage is not one for pit stops.
They both nod. They exchange a quick glance between each other before Foster looks away. Hamlin then, looking back to the bill of sale, giving a sure nod and tucking it into his breast pocket. He makes sure to pat it to reassurance before straightening up.
I give a slight nod. Now, the second matter. As Mr. Foster has mentioned, in my expansion of our business, I have indeed been thinking of that tonight. You see, Hackney, the Hackney Company, seems to have, well, at the very least, have had a monopoly on the cabs and omnibuses in the city.
Foster inclines himself towards.
I seek to change this.
So you're saying you want to compete with the General Omnibus Company?
Indeed I do. Especially as many of these omnibuses end their services on the stroke of midnight, extend them farther into the night. Allow factories and manufacturers access to workers throughout the day, all 24 hours.
Foster taps a finger against his left knee, bouncing the foot. You can see the wheels in his head churning. He does this a lot whenever he's in deep thought. Hamlin strokes at his mustache, reclined into a seat, his arms crossed over his chest. before Angus leans forward. Mr. Thorne, with all respect, may I ask a question?
By all means.
Competition with the London General Omnibus Company is going to be stiff. They control all the omnibuses already. They're the only company running them. Well, there's a couple of small competitors. Why don't we just take over one of the competitor companies? Or the omnibus company? We're no strangers to the means of negotiation.
That is precisely why I enjoy working with the both of you. Yes, that is certainly a good idea. I do enjoy the thought of keeping matters in-house, as it were. And that, I believe, is the crux of this matter. Is there, in your observations of our men, one deserving of certain advancement? One that may be good to oversee such an endeavour?
Both fall into deep consideration. Hamlin eventually pulling a hand away from his face, though it hovering a short distance away, he seems to pause before looking at you. If I'm to understand correct, Mr. Thorne, you want to build a company up from the ground so that you can control it from birth to growth.
Indeed. And, if fortune may have it, assimilate several of those smaller companies Mr. Foster mentioned.
Hamlin gives a very slow nod as he goes back to looking a bit upward, a bit above your head as he strokes his mustache. Angus now leans forward. If that's the case, Mr. Thorne, I think I know a good man for the job. He's become one of my most trusted. I'd be slow to part with him, but he might also be acquainted with fellows that would be happy to help promote the company as well as display the inadequacies of the other omnibus companies of the city. Through creative means, of course. Hamlin shakes his head, his left hand sweeping outward as though to wipe away what Foster has said. No, that's no good. You can't be so aggressive on new business. We first have to secure omnibuses. We need a man with a good head for business, Mr. Thorne. I know a lad. Young, but a good mind for numbers. An accountant he was before joining us. He would be able to manage the finances and, in a more legal fashion, buy out some of the smaller companies as they are suffering for business under the London General. In fact, he might even be able to suggest things that myself and Agnes aren't too sure of as sort of strategy.
I must say, Mr. Hamlin, this gentleman does sound rather fit for the job. Apologies, Mr. Foster, though Mr. Hamlin does make a good point. If we are to assimilate these companies, we best do so politely. We are, after all, trying to outfish a shark, as it were.
Agnes acquiesces, throwing up his hands as though, Sirrah, He bounces his foot as he leans back into his seat, looking to Hamlin, offering out his right hand as though to say, you won this one.
What does Angus's aura tell me?
Go ahead and roll.
I'm still employing my gifts of Auspex.
You'd be stupid not to.
Especially given my dice pool, my goodness.
Okay. Very differently from Mr. Hamlin, the primary color you can see throughout his aura is momentarily a sharp, dark green as he acquiesces. And yet it immediately shifts, even before his attention changes. Even as he's acquiescing, it passes from envy and into an excited violet that thrums throughout his veins as though highlighting them to you.
And Mr. Hamlin's aura is much the same as it was, yes?
It's settled into a calm lavender. Leaning forward, Foster puts a hand on your desk, almost standing up as he does, trying to get as much of your attention as physically possible. Mr. Thorne, I had an idea as to all this omnibus business.
Indeed, Mr. Foster.
Say we put some investment into the London General Omnibus Company. They start applying more pressure to the small ones, makes them easier to acquiesce to our requests, especially if we send them a good offer. What's more, have an investment in the company allows whomever is attached to that investment to have a bit of insider knowledge of what the company's up to.
A magnificent idea, Mr. Foster. Mr. Hamlin, please see to it that your man accomplishes such tasks.
Putting a hand splaying across your desk, Foster tries to regain your attention. Well, how would it look if your competitor starts investing in you? Naturally, you're going to have your eyes on him, Mr. Thorne.
Then who would you have in mind, Mr. Foster? The young bull you...
No, he's a good salesman, Mr. Thorne, but no mind for that kind of thing. I say we get a patsy. One of the shop owners that buys from us. I'm sure he wouldn't mind a bit of hoopla and friends to be made. Especially if we give him a bit of a discount on some of his next purchases. Hamlin gives a slight and looks away.
Which shop owner would you have in mind? A simple retailer? It would be strange for such a... It would be strange for a retailer to venture into such business, particularly as...
That's why we go to the factory owner, Mr. Donovan.
Oh, so do I recognize that name?
Go ahead and roll a wits and alertness.
I'm immediately thinking that isn't Mr. Donovan related to that old textile mill that I was supposed to own?
No need to roll, apparently.
Fantastic. I hate that fucker. Mr. Donovan, the head of that textile mill.
Exactly, Mr. Thorne. You don't like him as it is, right?
Oh, what gave it away?
The general content whenever you say his name.
Edmund smiles at that.
Hamlin leans forward. We should not seek to undermine the general omnibus company. If we were to take it over, that would be one thing. But we should keep competitors, help business innovate. And it's better to compete. It can help drum up good publicity. At that, Agnes blatantly rolls his eyes, as though playing fair just isn't in his wheelhouse.
Yes, I do agree, Mr. Hamlin. A reputation as some constructor of monopoly would not do well in an organization that values the free market, so... Although, having an insider knowledge would be useful.
Agnes nods. We're already considering a different market. They're targeting the general populace. They're targeting workers. Workers appreciate people getting them around. Your routes could be angled to take them places that the general company doesn't go. We just have to choose our market. From there, the customers follow.
Indeed. Although... employing a patsy to invest in our competitor company, a patsy that is so closely tied to the business that we wish to solicit. Having such an investor in that company may propose some competition in our routes, no?
They exchange a look. Mr. Foster sitting down. Hamlin seems a bit self-satisfied to see Foster at a loss for words for a moment. But he seems to get over that rather quickly. A knock comes at your door. Mr. Thursbury, you can hear the voice. Mr. Thorne.
Yes, Mr. Shrewsbury.
You have an unannounced gentleman here to speak with you.
Mr. Hamlin, please see to it that the arrangements for the shipment are made immediately.
Don't have anything to worry about, Mr. Thorne. I'll go choose out the men in Deptford myself.
Thank you. We shall continue this discussion regarding the transportation company later this evening.
They both nod. I'll be sure to think up some things, Mr. Thorne, says Foster as he stands, putting his hat on his head. He gives it up at the top so it stays in place.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
As they stand and excuse themselves to leave, you see that the gentleman waiting to speak with you doesn't wait very long. No sooner have they cleared the door that he strides in, taking off his spectacles from his eyes, as he offers you a curious expression. End scene.